Well, welcome from Destin. I seem to have recorded a video, but it seems to not have worked. So I'm going to make this one a bit shorter and briefer, which is probably better for you anyway. This week I'm in Destin, Florida with my family, just on a vacation. Of course, I'm still working, so I'll be online in the discussions every morning, as well as on email, responding to emails, checking them at least a couple times a day. I'll be on just about as frequently, maybe a little less this week, or at least a couple of days this week. Um, but you can always get a hold of me through email. Let me just run through some of these items rather quickly. General comments on posts, they've been overall pretty good. I would try this week to even be a bit more specific in your responses. Hopefully you're getting your feet wet, you're getting more comfortable with the whole process and structure and organization. This week is basically the same. You're going to respond to two forum questions. You're going to give a sort of a reflection essay, and you'll upload that, as well as you're going to respond not to two, but to five other course mates minimally. So make sure you do that this week. I hope you're enjoying your time doing that, and you're learning from your other course mates, and you're getting a bit more involved and a bit more in detail and depth into the readings themselves. One thing that I would also recommend is that you draw more heavily from the required readings in your responses, maybe even outside of your readings, if you have to deal with specific issues or specific issues come up that you need to do a little bit more thinking or research on. Make sure you give some sort of maybe parenthetical reference, a short reference. Don't spend a lot of space there, but a parenthetical reference to where you're referring into your reading. This is a graduate level course, so in your readings, you really do need to carefully read through everything that is required. Make sure that you have ascertained the meaning of the books required. This includes Odin this week, and Lewis, and recommended Keller's readings. Highly recommend. I would recommend you read it. At least skim through Keller's readings, if nothing else. But it's absolutely a must that you digest the other readings. So what this means is that as you're reading through them, you need to even just have a pen, pencil with your notebook, taking notes, writing down the analogies that are being used, working through the arguments that are being put forward, and the evidences that are suggested as support for the thesis that the authors are making. You need to be familiar with that. And then you need to move beyond that and seek to really synthesize and integrate the material that you're reading between Lewis and Odin and Keller, and any reading outside of that that you're familiar with or that you've been reading on your own. For those who are advanced students who are, quote unquote, you might say the A students, the ones who really go above and beyond, you really do need to do the minimal reading as well as reading outside of what is required. Okay, moving on. Just to give you an idea of time spent each week in this course, this is a 5-week course. It's a summer course. You are typically, if you're not in an online course, you would spend about 8 hours inside the classroom, which includes lecture time as well as discussion time in the classroom. But on top of that, you think, well, you need to double that time, typically or ideally. So approximately, you should be spending at least about 24 hours a week on the course. And that includes your reading times. That includes your discussion times. That includes watching and listening to the videos and any other interactions you may have through email, etc., etc. Working on your papers. Okay, so the topic for this week is the Trinity, creation, and the problem of evil. I had a more lengthy sort of thought or a set of thoughts on these issues in the previous video that didn't record. So I'm going to keep this a bit more brief. But one of the core Christian doctrines, obviously, is the question of not only what God is, question that we dealt with last week, but also who is God? Who is this God that we worship and serve as Christians? And we proclaim a God that is a Trinitarian God, not just a monotheistic God. That certainly is one claim that we make. According to the Shema, God is one. And this is the Old Testament God that we serve and worship. But God is also Trinity, and that becomes more clear in the New Testament. And it especially becomes more clear and codified and developed in the context of tradition after the New Testament, where we find the statement about the Trinitarian nature of God codified in the Apostles' and Nicene Creed, and even more so in the Athanasian Creed. And this is something that we as Orthodox Christians, who want to stay within Orthodox boundaries, proclaim as central to the faith. If you think of the worldview as sort of this web, well, the Trinity would be sort of right at the center of the web, holding everything else together, such that if you took that out of the web, your whole web would be destroyed. You would have to repair it, and you would have a different worldview altogether. So the Trinitarian worldview is really a core, central, and essential doctrine of the Christian faith. And it permeates everything else that we think about in Christianity and Christian theology. So when we come to the topics of creation and the problem of evil, a Christian response, a thorough and substantive Christian response, will include, or at least resort back to, the nature of God as a Trinitarian being. How we understand the creation and the problem of evil will necessarily have some sort of recourse back to the Trinitarian God in whom we serve and worship. So when we seek to respond to the problem of evil, we're not seeking to respond to it just like the philosophers respond to it, although we see many theologians throughout church history using and drawing from the philosophers in their responses to the problem of evil. But we're going above and beyond that, and we must, as Christians, if we have some sort of unique Christian response to the problem, we must be able to say something about how it is that this Trinitarian God imports or gives us information that helps us to make sense of the world that we live in, the world that is full of corruption and evil. So you need to think about that. Seek to integrate Trinity with creation and the problem of evil. And traditionally, the Christian response to the problem of evil, at least one response, has been the Augustinian response that we offer in part. The explanation is that evil finds its origination in the will of human beings, human personal agents. This means that that evil and corruption is not solely wrapped up in physical matter. For physical matter doesn't have personal agency. It's not a mind, so it can't bring about evil. Nor is it sort of intrinsically or essentially a part of the intellect. Although the intellect is the origination of evil, or at least the origination of evil is brought about by the powers of the soul. And that is a traditional response to at least part of the explanation as to how evil came into being, if we can even speak of evil as existing. For most throughout church history, especially for the medievals, evil wasn't something that really did actually exist. Now later on in the Reformation, you do have some Reformed theologians who do move in a different direction and say that evil really does have some kind of existence, although an attenuated existence, or an existence that is not absolute, as we find with the dualists, or maybe with the Gnostics. So we're not claiming that matter is evil, and we're not claiming that evil stands on its own. And generally, Christians would say that evil itself isn't really substantial in itself, but in fact, it depends and is contingent upon willful personal actions. It comes into being in that way. So this week, as you're thinking through these things, think through how is it as a Christian, how do we as Christians respond appropriately to the problem of evil? This will have import not only into your apologetic conversations, but also into pastoral conversations, and it'll inform how you seek to respond to these issues in the world around us. Okay, thinking about your papers, just a couple of general comments about that. I hope that you are thinking about that, continuing to think about that, and you're reading outside of your readings in relation to your paper. Hopefully you've picked out a general topic by now and you're beginning to specify that topic. If you haven't specified your topic to a very specific feature or aspect or problem within a particular doctrinal issue, then you need to do so really quickly, immediately, I would suggest. This is really important. And you need to begin to really hone your thesis. And make sure as you're thinking about your thesis statement that you're tying that thesis statement in a set of literature that has already dealt with the specific topic that you're handling or you're addressing or you're critiquing. Make sure that you embed your thesis statement in a set of literature that's already addressed these issues. And so your topical question, the big question that you're seeking to answer in your paper, needs to really emerge from the set of literature that you've been thinking through. And so it needs to somehow be tied to or related to a set of questions that have already been, to some degree, addressed in the literature or in a set of literature. And so you don't really need to come up with a sort of vastly sort of abstract, novel question that has never been raised before. That's pretty dangerous. I'm not saying you can't do that, but I would strongly suggest not doing that. That's not to say that your paper and your thesis can't be novel in some way, or at least can't offer some sort of novel application or novel angle or a fresh new insight into the problem itself. I hope you will aim in that direction. You'll move in that direction where you're trying to say something fresh and novel, or at least articulate it in a new way, where you're really honing the material and mastering the material in such a way that you have something to say. You have your own voice in the matter. That makes for a good paper. But in order to do that, you really do need to do that in the context of the literature and where the literature has already gone, where the literature has already addressed these topics. So make sure that you are digesting good literature in relation to the topic and the thesis that you're seeking to develop. I can't emphasize that enough, and you really need to be working on that now. So we talked about some topics last week. I sent you some emails with some topic ideas, some literature that you can refer to. If those topics are of interest to you and that's what you're going to be working on, hopefully you've already started reading some of that literature and you're bringing that into your term paper. The topics this week are thoroughly viable topics for you to consider. The Trinity, you could consider one particular issue within the Trinity and make a thesis or argue for some point within that particular issue, or the problem of evil, or the doctrine of creation, whatever it may be. Again, in your syllabus, it does say that your term paper needs to be about 3,000 words. That's fine. In fact, it can even be less than that. It could be 2,000 or 2,500 words or 3,000 words. That doesn't that's not so crucial or pertinent to me. What I'm looking for is that you have a well-developed thesis and you can sufficiently argue for that thesis with thoughtful evidence and support of that thesis. That's what I'm looking for. So if you can do that in 2,000 words, then do it. But make sure it's good. Make sure it's golden. I think that's about it for now. If I've missed anything, I'll send you some emails. If you have any question, send me an email, and I'll try to answer your question thoroughly this week. Again, I am in Destin, Florida, but I am on Wi-Fi. I do have Wi-Fi here, and so I should be able to respond to my emails in plenty of time. So I hope you're doing well. I hope you're enjoying your time in the discussions online, and you're enjoying the readings, and you are learning and growing. We'll talk again soon. Looking forward to our discussions. Thanks. Bye.